In the far edges of the galaxy, where law was nothing more than a forgotten word and survival belonged to the strongest mercenaries ruled with steel and fire, they whispered stories of great battles of lost empires and of fragile worlds that broke. At the first sign of war, and among those whispers, one name always brought laughter. Earth humans were called weak too, emotional, too fragile. Their bodies not strong, their worlds not united. Mercenary captains joked that a single squad of their fighters could crush an entire human outpost. And so the galaxy moved on, ignoring Earth, leaving it in shadows. But in the outer rim, where legends were born and blood was currency, strange rumors began to spread, rumors that unsettled even hardened soldiers. Men spoke of human squads that had survived impossible missions. Soldiers who returned from places where no one else lived. Mercenaries who mocked them began to lower their voices at the campfires when these tales were told because something in the stories carried weight and truth. Marcus Hale, a scarred mercenary captain who had fought more battles than he could count, had once laughed at the thought of humans. He had led companies that burned cities across the stars and never once considered humans a threat. But that changed on a nameless moon where he lost half his company to a band of human fighters, their eyes cold, their movements precise. He had never forgotten how they looked at him, not as prey, but as predators. Since that day, Marcus kept silent when others mocked Earth. He watched and waited, and when a contract came across his desk offering a high price to eliminate a human outpost on Epsilon the 4, Marcus accepted not out of greed, but out of curiosity. He wanted to see the truth. With his own eyes, his ship, the Black Fang, drifted through the void like a predator engine's whispering as it carried his crew to the jungle world of Epsilon 4. His lieutenants laughed as they checked their weapons, already tasting easy victory. But Marcus remained silent. His memories burned into him like scars when the ship landed. The jungle greeted them thick with shadows and silence. Too much silence. Scouts moved ahead, vanishing between the trees. Marcus listened to the static of their comms as the green canopy closed above. Minutes passed, then hours, until a scream cracked across the channel. A scream filled with terror, cut short by gunfire. His lieutenants froze, staring at him, wide-eyed. Marcus ordered reinforcements into the jungle, but one by one their signals blinked out, leaving only the echo of gunshots, and silence. Tension tightened around the mercenaries like a noose as the jungle swallowed their men whole. Marcus clenched his fists. The memory of those human eyes. Burning in his mind, the last transmission crackled through, broken with static and fear before silence claimed it. The words struck deep into the crew. They fight like demons. The jungle world of Epsilon the 4 stretched wide under a dim red sun, its trees rising like pillars of shadow and its air heavy with damp heat. Marcus Hale moved through the undergrowth with his mercenaries. Their weapons raised their eyes, scanning every corner, but nothing moved, only the sound of dripping leaves and distant thunder. And yet Marcus felt it. He felt the weight of unseen eyes watching, tracking. Judging his men whispered nervously, cursing about the scouts who had vanished hours before. Some claimed the humans had fled. Others said they had hidden underground. But Marcus knew better. He had seen the precision of human strikes before. This silence was not fear. It was the silence of predators waiting for the right moment. The mercenaries set up camp near the ruins of an old mining facility. Steel bones rusted, and broken by time, they placed sentry drones and scanners around the perimeter, believing it would keep them safe. But Marcus noticed how the jungle swallowed sound, how shadows clung to the edges of their lights as if hiding something in the dark. His lieutenants boasted loudly, mocking humans as weak creatures, pretending to be soldiers. Marcus did not silence them, but inside he knew their laughter would not last that night. The first trap was sprung. One of the sentry drones blinked off without. A sound when a mercenary went to check his body never returned, only his helmet rolling back into the light smeared with blood. Panic spread through the camp, orders shouted, weapons raised, but then the jungle itself came alive. Gunfire erupted from the shadows, precise bursts that struck with terrifying accuracy. 3 mercenaries fell before they even saw their attackers. The survivors fired wildly into the trees, lighting the jungle with blazing red bolts, but the humans had already vanished, moving too fast, too silent. Marcus dropped to cover his eyes, scanning the darkness, and for a brief moment, he saw them, figures low to the ground, faces hidden behind visors, their movements sharp and disciplined, not the chaos of survivors, but the grace of hunters. One of his lieutenants shouted that it was only a small band and that they should chase them into the jungle against Marcus's instincts. The mercenaries rushed forward, stomping into the trees, guns blazing. They moved deeper, but the deeper they went, the more the jungle turned against them. Paths narrowed into choke points. Mines hidden under leaves tore squads apart. Gunfire came from above, from the branches from behind, and every shot counted. More mercenaries fell screaming into the dirt. Marcus barked orders to pull back, but the jungle swallowed his men whole. Blood soaked the earth, and still the humans were nowhere to be seen, only their rifles whispering death from every angle, when at last Marcus dragged what was left of his squad back to the ruined facility. Night had fallen, and the camp reeked of fear. Mercenaries stared at the shadows, jumping at every sound, their bravado shattered. One prisoner was dragged in, a mercenary captured alive by the humans before. Being released, his eyes wide with terror. He whispered broken words. "They are not running from us. They are not hiding. They are hunting us." Marcus listened, his jaw tight, his heart heavy as he stared out into the black jungle. He knew the man spoke. The truth: these humans were not prey. They were predators, and by coming here the mercenaries had walked into their den. The night on Epsilon 4 was unlike any other night Marcus Hale had ever faced across the countless battlefields of the galaxy. The jungle was alive, but not with its own creatures. It was alive with silence, the kind of silence that pressed against the skin and made the heart beat faster. Mercenaries huddled close around the flickering lights of their camp, clutching their rifles, eyes darting into the darkness. Every rustle, every shifting shadow was a threat. Marcus walked slowly among them, his boots crunching softly on the dirt, his scarred face grim. He said nothing because he knew words would not save them. What waited in the trees was not an enemy. They understood. It was something they had never prepared for. The first attack came just before dawn, when the mercenaries were at their weakest. Tired eyes, struggling to stay awake in the dim light, a sharp whistle sliced the air, followed by an explosion that tore through the east barricade. Men screamed as shrapnel tore through, flesh before the smoke cleared. Gunfire rained from the tree line, not wild, not scattered, but precise. Each shot claiming a target before slipping back into silence. The mercenaries fired into the jungle, blazing arcs of light, carving through trees. But the humans never stayed in one place. The more the mercenaries shot, the emptier their guns became, and the closer the shadows pressed. Marcus shouted for cover, dragging 2 men down just as a burst of fire cut them down where they had been standing. Seconds before he raised his rifle, scanning the darkness, and saw them again. Faint outlines moving like phantoms. Their steps measured their fire, coordinated, not a band of survivors, not farmers with stolen guns. These were soldiers, disciplined, trained, ruthless. The attack lasted only minutes, but when it ended, 10 more mercenaries lay dead, and the humans were gone again, as if the jungle itself had swallowed them. The survivors stared at Marcus, their faces pale, their bravado broken. One lieutenant spat curses at the night, claiming they were fighting ghosts. Another demanded they call the ship and retreat. Marcus silenced them with a look, his voice low but steady. "No, they want us to run. If we run, they will cut us down before we reach the landing zone. This is not panic. This is strategy. They are bleeding us out. One strike at a time, as the sun rose over the thick canopy. Marcus studied the battlefield traps triggered too cleanly, attacks too precise. He realized the truth that chilled him. More than anything, these humans were not simply defending the outpost. They were testing them, learning their tactics, adjusting with every clash. The mercenaries thought themselves hunters, but they had become prey driven into exhaustion and fear. Hours later, while scouting the perimeter, Marcus found something half buried in the dirt, a symbol carved into the metal frame of a broken drone. It was not alien, it was human, a mark of a unit, long thought destroyed in another war, the name etched. Beside it, made him freeze the Black Wolves, a legendary squad whispered about even among mercenaries. Men said they never lost missions. Men said they vanished after the council abandoned them years ago. Marcus now knew those whispers had not been lies. They had come here. They had survived. And now they fought not as mercenaries, not as soldiers for hire, but as predators defending their world when he returned to camp. Marcus found his men restless, some packing gear ready to flee, others arguing. Loudly, but before he could speak, a voice broke through the calm static, clear, cold, and human. Leave. Now the voice said, "Or none of you will live." The camp went silent. Fear and anger clashed in the mercenaries' eyes. Some screamed challenges into the trees, others shivered as if death itself had spoken. Marcus stood frozen, listening to the calm authority in that voice. It was not a bluff, not a plea. It was a promise, and deep inside his scarred heart, he knew the mercenaries were already defeated. The jungle heat pressed heavy on the mercenary camp, the air thick with sweat and fear. As Marcus Hale stood watching his men unravel, discipline was breaking down faster than their numbers. Those who once laughed at the idea of humans now sat in silence, polishing their rifles with trembling hands. Others argued loudly about retreat, their voices sharp and desperate, but Marcus said nothing because he could still hear that voice on the comms. Calm, steady, certain, it echoed in his mind like a warning. Leave now, or none of you will live. Mercenaries were not afraid of death. They lived for it. They dealt it in every contract, every raid. But what gnawed at them now was the way the humans fought, not with numbers, not with overwhelming firepower, but with precision and patience, each attack calculated, each kill deliberate. It was not war, it was a hunt, and they were the prey. As the sun began to sink behind the tree line, Marcus ordered new defenses, set, motion trackers, mines, perimeter drones, anything. They had left, his lieutenants obeyed. But he saw the doubt in their eyes when night came. The jungle swallowed the camp in shadow. Torches burned dimly, their flames dancing with the whispers of the wind. Men sat wide-eyed, rifles clutched against their chests. The silence dragged on too long, too deep, until at last it shattered with the sound of movement. Not in the trees this time, but inside the camp itself. Screams erupted as shadows darted between the lights. Mercenaries spun, firing wildly and hitting nothing. Then one of the barracks exploded in a burst of fire, sending men flying. The camp turned into chaos. Marcus roared orders, pulling survivors together, but the attack was too swift, too precise. The humans had slipped past every defense. Tearing the camp apart from within, one mercenary was dragged screaming into the dark, his rifle clattering to the dirt. Another fell with a clean shot to the head before anyone saw the shooter. The survivors huddled together, firing blindly at shadows. But the more they fought, the fewer remained. Marcus forced his way to the command tent, slamming the door shut behind him, alarms flashing red across the screens, every drone offline, every sensor blinded, and in the center of the chaos, a single feed flickered to life. A helmet camera showing a human soldier standing tall, visor glowing faintly through the smoke. He said nothing, only raised a rifle, and the feed cut to black. Marcus clenched his fists, rage burning against fear. But even he could not deny the truth. These humans were no longer weak. They were no longer overlooked. They were something else entirely. When dawn came, the camp was half destroyed, Bodies scattered among the wreckage, only a handful of mercenaries remained, their faces hollow, their voices broken. Some begged Marcus to abandon the mission, others whispered that the pay was not worth the blood spilled. Marcus listened, but his gaze stayed fixed on the jungle. He remembered the mark he had found, the black wolves. If the stories were true, then this was more than an outpost. This was a den of killers forged by betrayal, abandoned by the council, left to die, and instead they had become something stronger, something mercenaries feared without admitting. Marcus finally spoke, his voice low but sharp enough to cut through the despair. If we leave now, we are dead. They will hunt us all the way back to orbit. There is only one path forward. We find them. We face them. We break them. The survivors stared, some shaking their heads, others nodding because fear had already hollowed them out. Marcus knew most of them would not see another dawn, but deep in his scarred soul, he also knew the humans would not stop until he stood face to face with them. Not as predator and prey, but as enemies in a war neither side could afford to lose. The ruins of the mercenary camp still smoldered under the pale dawn light, twisted steel and blackened earth, a reminder of the night before. Marcus Hale stood among the wreckage, his jaw tight as he watched his remaining soldiers drag bodies into a line, their faces pale, their eyes hollow. There were less than 30 left from the original company, more than half gone to traps, ambushes, and fear the jungle around them whispered with unseen movement. The rustle of leaves, the drip of water, the distant crack of branches, and every sound felt like a warning. Marcus knew the humans were out there. He could feel them like shadows pressed against his skin. Waiting patient. Ruthless, the mercenaries had hunted across dozens of worlds they had. Broken colonies and toppled fortresses, but here against men who were supposed to be weak, they were unraveling faster than he could hold them together. He gathered them in what was left of the courtyard, his voice cutting through the heavy air. "You are afraid," he said, "and you should be. These are not the farmers we thought they were. These are soldiers abandoned like dogs left to die by the council, and they have turned their fury into a blade. But make no mistake, they bleed, they can be broken. If you can stand your ground." Silence met his words. Some eyes lit with fire, but most with doubt. Still Marcus pressed on. "We do not leave until we take them down. If you run, they will hunt you to the edge of the stars. The jungle will not save you. The council will not save you. Only steel will save you here." A few nodded, fear turning into resolve. But Marcus saw the truth in their shaking hands. He could not rebuild courage in men who had already lost it as the sun climbed high, he ordered. A march into the jungle, a direct strike deep into enemy ground. His scouts warned against it, but Marcus knew waiting would only bring more blood. The humans were hunters, and the longer they waited, the tighter the noose would close. The column moved. Slow through the thick undergrowth, weapons raised every step careful, but even their caution was not enough. The first trap exploded without warning, tearing apart. The vanguard screams filled the air as trees collapsed in fire and smoke. The survivors scrambled for cover, and then the gunfire came not from ahead, but from every side. The humans struck like ghosts, bursts of fire cutting through the trees, every shot hitting its mark. Mercenaries returned, fire screaming curses, but their bolts lit. Only empty branches. The humans never stayed in one place, never revealed themselves long enough to be struck. Marcus fought through the chaos, dragging men into cover, barking orders. Above the roar of battle, he saw them moving low to the ground. Faces, hidden behind visors, their motions sharp, coordinated packs of wolves circling prey. He fired, catching one in his scope, but the soldier slipped away like mist, vanishing into shadow. The firefight lasted minutes, but felt like hours, until at last, the jungle went quiet again. Bodies littered the ground, and the column was broken. Marcus stood over the dead, his chest heaving, fury boiling in his blood. He knew now the truth. The humans were not fighting to win quickly. They were breaking them. Slowly, piece by piece, they were teaching the mercenaries fear. One lesson at a time, when the survivors regrouped, Marcus led them deeper anyway, refusing to turn back. The men whispered about curses about ghosts, but Marcus ignored them, his eyes hard, fixed on the shadows ahead. If these really were the Black Wolves, then this war was no longer about credits or contracts. It was about survival, about proving that mercenaries could still stand against legends as the jungle swallowed them once more. Marcus made a silent vow he would face them. He would drag these ghosts into the light, even if it cost him every man he had left, because only by facing them would he uncover the truth about what humans had become. The jungle grew darker as the mercenaries pushed deeper, every branch twisting like claws, every patch of mist curling low around their boots. The men marched in silence, their nerves strung tight like wire. Marcus Hale led them from the front, his eyes fixed forward, his rifle steady. But inside, he could feel the weight pressing heavier. With each step, fewer than 20 remained, their faces gaunt, their bodies worn down from sleepless nights. The air smelled of damp earth and blood. The ghosts of the fallen, following close behind it, was not long before the jungle gave way to a clearing, a stretch of ground too quiet, too open, too still. Marcus raised his hand to halt his men, but before he spoke, the ground shuddered. Explosions erupted around them, tearing the air apart. Fire roared, as men were thrown screaming into the dirt, and then from the smoke the shadows came. The humans stepped forward, not as scattered hunters this time, but as a pack soldiers in black armor moving with precision rifles raised their eyes hidden behind dark visors. Marcus fired first his bolt, slamming into one soldier and driving him back, but the line did not break it. Advanced step by step, their fire raining like a storm. Mercenaries fell one by one, but still they fought desperate curses on their lips. The clearing burned with the fury of two sides locked in final clash. Marcus shouted orders, dragging survivors into cover, returning fire with every ounce of strength, but he knew this was different from the ambushes. Before, this was no test, no lesson. This was the kill strike. The Black Wolves had chosen to finish it. The humans pressed closer, their movements sharp and fluid, every shot deliberate, every strike measured. Marcus watched one leap from the smoke sliding across the ground. To flank his men, cutting two down before vanishing back into the haze, he cursed and fired again, rage burning hotter than fear. But even as bodies fell, he could not shake the thought that these were no ordinary soldiers. They fought like a single, mind a force bound together by fury and discipline. The mercenaries broke lines, scattered men screaming as they fled into the trees. But the wolves followed. Not with shouts, not with cries, only silence, only the steady rhythm of rifles spitting fire. Marcus bellowed for his men to stand, but only a handful obeyed. The rest were already lost as he turned to fire again. A burst of energy slammed into the ground beside him, hurling him to the dirt, pain seared across his side, but he forced himself. Up, teeth clenched, his vision swam through the smoke, and there standing before him was the figure he had seen in the comm feed. Tall armor-scarred visor glowing faintly through the haze. Marcus raised his rifle, but the human was faster. A shot ripped, the weapon from his hand sending it spinning to the dirt. The soldier stepped closer, their voice breaking the silence at last, cold and steady. "We were weak once, but never again." Marcus glared, his chest heaving, fury boiling in his blood. "You are just men. Abandoned dogs, nothing more." The soldier tilted their head. "The council abandoned us. Yes, but we did not die. We became wolves, and wolves do not kneel." Marcus lunged, drawing his blade in one desperate strike. But the human caught his wrist. Twisting it with brutal precision, the knife fell to the dirt, and in that moment Marcus knew he had already lost the soldier's voice. Came again, quiet, but final. "Tell your kind, we are not prey." The blow came swift and merciless, and the jungle swallowed. The last scream, when the smoke cleared, only silence remained. The Black Wolves moved through the wreckage, gathering their own wounded, tending their dead, but leaving no trace of fear. Their victory was not of numbers or strength. It was of will forged. In betrayal hardened in fire, they had shown the mercenaries the truth, and the truth would spread like wildfire across the stars. Humans were no longer the forgotten race, no longer weak, no longer prey. They were hunters. They were wolves. And in the dark corners of the galaxy, every empire, every council, every mercenary band would soon remember the day they learned to fear them. Smoke drifted low across the battlefield as the last embers of fire dimmed to ash-twisted steel, and shattered helmets scattered across the clearing like bones of some fallen beast. The jungle was silent again, yet it was not peace. It was the silence. Of dominance, the silence left behind when predators had done their work. Marcus Hale lay still in the mud, his body broken, his voice silenced, and with him the last spark of mercenary defiance was gone. The black wolves stood victorious, but not without. Cost armor-scarred weapons, low shoulders heavy. Their own dead lay among the ruins, and yet there was no grief on their faces, only a grim steadiness, a bond forged through survival. Captain Darius Cade, the one Marcus had faced, pulled off his visor, his scarred face set in stone, eyes cold as ice. He scanned the horizon before turning to his soldiers. "Clean this field," he ordered. "We leave nothing behind. The mercenaries will not return, but their masters will." His voice carried the certainty of a man who had seen empires turn and betray. He knew this battle was only the beginning. The wolves moved swiftly, burying their fallen stripping weapons from the mercenary corpses and gathering what supplies remained. No trophies, no gloating, just preparation. Every action, precise, every motion, deliberate. When the work was done, they burned what was left of the enemy, leaving no sign of weakness. Only the black mark of fire upon the earth. As night fell, they regrouped deep within the jungle. Where the trees swallowed the starlight, the camp was quiet, the crackle of small fires, the hum of low conversation. But beneath it all ran a current of unspoken truth. They had not only survived, they had proven what the galaxy refused to believe, that humans were not weak, not broken, not forgotten, but stronger than the lies told about them. Darius stood apart, gazing up through the canopy at the scattered stars, his mind heavy with the weight of what came next. Mercenaries were not the true enemy, they were only the hands of greater powers. The Council, the Empire, those who had written Earth off as a failed world, who had sent its people to die without hesitation, would soon hear of this battle. They would learn of Marcus Hale's fall, and with it they would learn that the wolves were more than rumor, they were reality. Nearby, one of his lieutenants, Kara, approached, her armor dented, her voice low. "They'll come for us," she said, "not just mercenaries next time, fleets, whole fleets." Darius nodded his eyes. "Never leaving the stars. Let them come. Every man we lost tonight will rise again in memory. Every strike they send will only sharpen us. The wolves do not run." The word spread through the camp, a quiet vow that settled into the hearts of every soldier. They had been abandoned, left to rot on forgotten worlds. But through fire and blood, they had become something else, something the galaxy would one day curse or fear, but never again dismiss. The night stretched long, filled with the weight of what was to come. But in that weight, there was strength. There was clarity across the galaxy. Whispers would spread. Mercenaries broken by humans. Hunters hunted. Marcus Hale dead by their hand fleets, murmuring about ghosts in the dark, and councils trembling at the thought of men who had refused to die. The wolves had drawn first blood, and the stars themselves seemed to wait for what would follow. The stars above burned sharp and cold as the wolves left the jungle behind, their march steady, their ships rising from hidden valleys like black shadows into the night sky. The mercenary war was finished, their enemies broken, their leader, Marcus Hale, dead. Yet victory was only the opening act. The galaxy was already stirring. With whispers, fleets shifting, mercenary bands scattering council members, watching with uneasy silence for the first time in generations, the word human carried weight once more. Captain Darius Cade stood on the command deck of the Wolves flagship. His scarred hands resting on the edge of the console, the lights of distant systems glowing across the display reports came in one after another. Intercepted comms fragments of chatter, mercenary outposts gone dark, rumors spreading through trade, lanes of men in black armor who moved like phantoms who left no survivors. Darius listened without a flicker of pride, his eyes cold, his voice sharper than steel. "This is only the beginning," he told his officers. "They will come for us soon. Fleets, larger than any we have faced, but when they do, we will not hide, we will not run." His words struck deep into the crew, a reminder that their fight was not for survival alone, but for something greater, vengeance and respect the Council had abandoned. Earth left its people scattered, forced to sell themselves as miners, laborers, mercenaries, scraps at the edges of empires. But in that betrayal, they had found strength. They had become wolves, and wolves hunted together. Kara, his lieutenant, stepped. Forward reports confirm Council fleet movements near the Orion Belt. She said they're pulling ships from other sectors to prepare for something. Darius narrowed his eyes, so it begins. Then the mercenaries were pawns. The fleets will be the test. Let them see what Earth has become. The ship rumbled as engines burned, carrying them toward the void. Every man and woman on board strapped in weapons ready. Their silence heavier than speeches, each one knew what waited in the black, a war larger than any they had yet fought. But none flinched, for they were no longer fighting for themselves. They were fighting for a name, for a world that had been cast aside, and for the promise that no one would ever call humans weak again in distant halls. Of the council voices rose in panic, governors demanding answers, generals shouting about ghosts in armor, entire sectors, reporting losses from what was whispered to be only a handful of soldiers. But those whispers cut sharper than truth. The idea of humanity reborn was enough to rattle empires. One counselor slammed his fist against the table. "We should have finished them long ago." He hissed another. Spoke quieter but heavier. "No, you cannot kill what has already been abandoned. You cannot erase." Those who refused to die in the silence that followed, dread crept in, for they knew if the wolves could shatter mercenaries with so few numbers, what would happen when the scattered remnants of Earth rose together, when the forgotten found their strength. Darius stared at the starfield, his reflection faint in the glass. He saw not himself, but the shadows of thousands yet to come, scattered humans across colonies who would hear of this battle and know they were not alone. He spoke softly, but the words carried like fire through the deck tonight. "We stop being ghosts tonight. The galaxy learns that Earth does not kneel." The crew roared their answer, a sound like thunder that shook the very walls of the ship. And in the black void ahead, the wolves moved toward war. Their howls silent, but their presence undeniable. The galaxy had abandoned them, but it would remember them now not as prey, not as weak, but as hunters, as predators, as the storm waiting at the edge of the stars, and when that storm broke, no empire would be safe.